Welcome to the Bikeshed Podcast, where we talk about all things software engineering, current technical challenges we've been facing, and not if, but when AI will take our jobs. I'm your co-host, UI cheerleader, local coffee critic, and keyboard collector, Scott K. And alongside with me are my wondrous co-hosts, an unused dependency's worst nightmare, the open source workhorse, the man who graduated summa cum laude in GitHub contributions, Matt Hamlin. And my other marvelous co-host, who's always stirring the pot because he knows how to spice things up, Dillon Spicy Take Curry. Matt, what's on the docket today?
Yeah, today we're going to kick off with our stand-up updates, where we talk about what's new with us over the past week, what we've been doing, etc. And then we're going to dig into our main topic for today, which is all about design systems, which is maybe not that much of a hot topic these days, but I think it'll be an interesting discussion. And then after that, we're going to wrap up with our final segments, two takes and a fake, and spicy takes with curry. Dillon, do you want to kick us off with your stand-up update this week?
Yep, I can take that, Matt. I'll go quick work update because we're in stand-up. Got shifted from one project to another project because the other project just is more important right now. Needs more help. But it's been fun to just be like take a pause on what I was working on for a very long time and just like jump into some other things and sort of help people that didn't have time to work on those things. So that's been fun. Also diving into code that I wish I could just completely rewrite, but there's just not time. I was talking to Matt about that yesterday. And besides that, started listening to an audiobook just while like running and commuting. I don't usually listen to books or read books, so it's been kind of cool. It's a book called Sapiens. People probably heard of it. It's like a history of humankind book. It's like the sort of book most people probably listen to fall asleep, but it's been kind of interesting.
Yeah, so I guess this is maybe not necessarily a stand-up update for me, but for the podcast, apparently we're going viral in Romania. We're in like the top 170 or so technology podcasts, which makes me wonder, like, are there only 170 technology podcasts listed in Romania? But
A lot of podcasts.
Anyway,
Hopefully we can get to 160 soon.
Yeah. Outside of that, and kind of like outside of work stuff, I've been exploring the Cloudflare Vite plugin, which is pretty neat. Lets you sort of build a worker and also like a client-side app all in one go, which is pretty sweet. And along with that, I've also been experimenting with Tinybase, which is like a sync engine, I guess, for web applications. I don't know. It's a little bit early days, but it's pretty cool to explore this stuff. Scott, what about you? What's your stand-up update?
That's better than me. I've been pretty lazy. So I've been off this week because I'm starting a new job next week. So I did some home chores. I regrouted the tiles on my first floor. And at my front door, I had my front door replaced maybe sometime last year. I finally regrouted the tiles up front there, fixed some grout in the shower, and cleaned out my car. Felt really good about getting some of these things done. Also fixed the leg on my couch, which was really great. I have this old Wayfair couch that I got with Wayfair rewards dollars, and the leg was starting to get was starting to flap around essentially. And I used the old wooden dowel trick. I put a wooden dowel in where the wood was starting to fray, and I re-screwed a screw in, and it's nice and tight now. So I was glad I was able to fix it and not have to buy a whole new couch there. But as far as work, this week I did a little bit. You'll notice we have a new Bikeshed Podcast logo, and we updated some of our metadata and our episode title covers. So we're really excited about that. I started some work on an incremental bun compiler. I basically built out a new monorepo, and I was just playing with it's a bun runtime monorepo. I kind of use a template that Matt has all the time. I wanted to just make sure I understood the inner workings of it, and I wanted to build some bun tools since there's opportunity there. I listed a bunch of other tools I might build to Matt in my free time towards the end of this week. And I'm going to go back to my Moon monorepo after this. So this monorepo I've been building uses Turbo. I wanted to try out Moon and also create a back end apps for Golang to see what the differences are, the discrepancies, and just kind of understand the setup. So just been playing around a little bit, looking for opportunities to build some non-UI focused things in that Bun compiler.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah. Yeah, I think we should maybe like transition to our main topic. So yeah, as I said before, like sort of our main, today we really just want to dig into design systems. I think it's a really broad topic, kind of like maybe some of our past episodes. So we may not cover all the things that people may want to hear about design systems. But I think we want to talk a little bit about, what are the benefits, what are the trade-offs when building or setting up a design system. Maybe even touch upon like, do you need a design system? Does your company need a design system? And possibly also cover a little bit of like, so the three of us worked on a design systems team at Wayfair. So maybe we'll talk a little bit about our history there and, interesting things that we had learned from that experience, other takeaways that maybe we can share. Yeah, Scott, I'm curious, like, what are some of your high level thoughts on design systems, and maybe we can kind of go from there.
Yeah, that's great. Unprepared, fully a cappella here. So I think design systems are very helpful, especially at a larger corporation. I think the approach we would take, where you have UI pieces that are standardized and reusable across a corporation, does make you move faster. It does create brand consistency and cohesiveness and make it easier to do rebrandings. Definitely helpful. I do think these same applications apply to smaller companies, but today I'm very pro Shadcn or getting a portion of that together for you, whereas basically the difference in approach, a lot of design systems tend to be packages in which you consume and someone manages that package and they make the updates. In a large corporation, it's a little bit easier for folks to take ownership of that area or space and distribute changes out to the rest of the organization. In a smaller business, you're not always going to be focused on just the design system, or it might be too much for a team to just focus on the design system. So using something like Shadcn, where you actually consume into your application the components you need to solve a problem, but you already get some of the best impacts out of it, the accessibility, you get to style it pretty quickly. If you pair it with Tailwind, since it's a first-class citizen, with Shadcn, you can more easily style from the start in your CSS what the theme looks like, and you get a lot more out of the box. So I believe design systems are necessary as you scale, but I also believe there's a lot of nuance to a design system. It's not as simple as one team knows best. It's also not as simple as something I've said in the past on the podcast, that in a spicy take, that like you should just do what other teams want you to do every time they need you to conform. I think Dillon kind of talked about this single response principle rule, but understanding that at a low level, we should document and understand what each component we expect its expectations to do. And we haven't gotten there yet, but something that we never really got to with the design system we all worked on together was creating patterns, what we called recipes, but essentially patterns of components that were leveraged often. We started to flex into this with Rogan and I when Dillon and Matt kind of moved on from the design system, where we would start identifying common patterns that some of our partner teams would need, and we would build those for them so that they would be less work up front. We wanted to create a design system that was flexible instead of a design system that was very rigid. And this can be difficult. We started in a rigid position so that we got the unity that we needed, the consistency that we needed. And then over time, we realized we wanted to let folks be able to do more. But with flexibility comes more work to set that up. And the way we wanted to tackle and solve that is create and identify common patterns that teams would use so that we could kind of create a registry or a place to find these common patterns and try to create a community that would help grow this together, where they didn't just need the folks on the design system to determine these things, but teams would talk to each other to do that. So I believe design systems create a real collaborative environment if done well and foster a lot of creativity. But it's very important to empathetically take someone's use case and always approach it as likely we need to use it or we need to do that, but what is the best approach to get there? And to not take a negative stance on that or to say, oh, no, we don't want the design system to do this. You need to do this. Teams need to come together and find, okay, you have this problem. Chances are some other team is eventually going to walk into this exact same issue. How do we document that? How do we show that to everyone? Because one thing we know with design systems and what we've learned is you can make a component or you can make some code that does a certain few things. A team is going to use it. People are going to try to leverage it for a use case you cannot foresee. So you want to do your best to document all the use cases for something. And then when a new use case arises, have a great conversation with the entire community around it.
Yeah, I think you hit upon a lot of interesting thoughts there. That might take us a while to sort of dig into each one in the nitty gritty. I think some of the stuff that you were saying resonates a lot with me, and like one of the things that sort of came to mind as you were talking is that I think a lot of organizations look at a design system team as a team that's meant to sort of only really deliver a component library and like some guidelines. But I think really the core benefit or like the core value proposition of a design system team is basically building up a UI contract across the organization, like basically a pact on between designers and engineers and product folks, basically anyone that has a vested interest in the product, to have like a consistent way to approach solving those UI and UX problems, right? Like sometimes that means that you're delivering an atomic component, like a button or a toast or something like that. But also sometimes it's just like more sort of vague and broad of like, here's like a pattern that you should use for solving these kinds of problems. And usually that's just like that's delivered to everyone across the organization in the form of documentation. At least that's my point. Is like the design system team is basically just an organization that lets you sort of specify and outline and share those common standards and patterns across the whole team or the whole company in a consistent manner, rather than just delivering on atomic components or whatnot, or design tokens or et cetera. But I think also like just because that team exists and it's meant to deliver on those standards and patterns, it's like you're not meant to solve every single UI problem that pops up across the organization. There's got to be like sort of a maybe it's like a 70-30 split where it's like 70% of the most common problems the design system team can help provide guidance for, and then the 30% is that's a really specific use case or specific to or in like a niche of the product that like that team should own making the decisions on how they solve those problems. Like I think that basically reiterates what you were saying, Scott, also. But I think it's like most people look at design system teams as just like they just build components, and I think that's maybe a false perspective potentially.
Dillon, do you have any thoughts before I lock in and pop off again? Go ahead.
Yeah, I got some thoughts. Just soaking it all in. There's a lot that was said here. I'm just gonna like start from the top of what I think is the most beneficial part of a design system, and to me, it's just having a single source of truth for the design for a company, whether that's design tokens or the UI in Figma. It's sort of top. It comes from there, and that's what we're using, and it comes top down to every other application that uses that brand identity, I guess. And to me, like I've gone from working at Wayfair where that I joined, and you guys already kind of had a design system before I even showed up, and we just continued to iterate on it. And I think it's probably one of the most mature ones I've seen, but I don't have a lot of exposure. One of two companies, so now I'm at a smaller company where we know we need a design system, but we just don't have the resources to dedicate for like one team to build that thing. We have one designer that really wants to do it, a couple engineers that really know it's important, but we just don't have time. And like we're using ShadCN, and I think we want to like hook up to Figma and like source tokens from there and do things like that. We just don't have the time. So it's interesting to maybe we don't have to jump into that. We can go straight into what Scott wants to cover, but maybe later on we can talk about like size of company and when it makes sense to invest in a design system.
So the single source of truth is a really great point, Dillon. The way I interpret that is, we have one thing that can be updated everywhere. I probably kind of glossed over this, doing this like quick monologue rant, but we want to be able to move faster. We want to be able to make changes faster. And having the tokens and UI, like you said, it helps us build a vision that people can buy in and have cohesion. And then for the design system team, I know I said like visual regression testing is useless recently. However, for this team, you can easily just put all those things in one place and see the output. You can see a before and after really easily. I want to go over quickly the point I was making about providing patterns is that, like Matt said, it's like 70%, maybe 80% of the code is going to be done again. But we want to be able to identify those things. And if we're writing the same code twice, we really should be documenting in a repository somewhere like patterns that we approve of or that we foresee often, because we really shouldn't be making it so folks build these things twice. And this is where I'm talking about the atomic versus maybe some more complex patterns, like they would call them atoms, molecules. So molecules and layout related things. We might provide some layout components. However, I think the struggle tends to be like, how do these components move into like molecule-like structure or larger structures? How do they take form into more compositions than just like at a really small level? And how do you document that? And something we talked about for a while when we worked together was having this repository of these patterns. And we should have been better about giving that, because if the purpose of a design system is to make it easier to move fast, these are ways to make you move fast. Whether that's like we had a code sandbox. Kudos to you guys who actually worked on this, but we had basically our own sandbox where you could pull in all of the components and scope and build something. But it would have been great if you could have just like picked some components, moved them around, had it a little bit of an easier way of seeing all those things and all the different use cases. Because here's a very specific example, like filters are something we built for our browse pages. Very common thing that would happen, but we almost should have built like a bunch of different filters and just tagged them filters, or every time we built them, put them in this repository space. So we saw like starting points, places to just get started and have UI, so we could move more fast into building something new. And it would, in theory, as long as we're taking care of those molecules, we could, or atomic elements, we could make sure that these kind of still worked. But basically just creating ways that not everyone has to do the same filters every single time. Not everyone has, like, we have different provided patterns and jump off points for different avenues. And something I want to back up and just say is Wayfair's design system was very complex. We provided design systems for stores, but we also did for internal UI and internal tools, and as well as like admin tools. So tools for our suppliers, tools for customers in our store, and tools that developers and other parts of the business would use. So we were trying to solve a lot of use cases and do that almost infinitely in a small space.
Yeah, I think I wanted to touch upon some of the stuff you were talking about, Scott, in terms of like, like pre-building patterns or like building multiple variants of the same pattern. So like, using an example like filters, right? I think that was like one of the pain points that I remember us running into on the design system team at Wayfair, was that for many of us on the design system team, we're like pretty far removed from the feature and product teams that we were supporting. Every once in a while we would get maybe a new person on the team that transitioned from another product team into us. So like they would have the, sort of the recency, understanding of like what were the pain points that feature teams ran into when using the design system or when building out features. What are the most common asked for features from product or whatnot. But I think for most of us on the design system team, like we had been there for a couple of years, and we were pretty far decoupled from the actual feature teams, right? The teams that maintain the actual, in the case of storefront, the actual features that customers interact with when they go through the flow, or in the case of our supplier-facing features, it's like, like what suppliers are actually using day to day. And so I think like one of the pain points we really encountered was just like trying to understand the problem space of building those more higher level components, higher level abstractions, in order to provide guidance there. And it's just we were so I think things we tried to do to make that better was like try to encourage collaboration or like contribution from those teams back to the design system. Like, hey, the browse team that maintained those filters, right? Like, contribute back to the design system with your insight, your patterns that you built up around how you manage filters in your product space. But I think we never really saw great success there. But I think that was just like an interesting dichotomy of like your design system, you want to provide guidance for all these other features, but usually you're in sort of an isolated team, and you're like pretty far from how those features are actually created. It's like I don't know, I feel like I want to reach for a really terrible metaphor, but I'll avoid doing that.
Yeah, this is where I kind of brought up that hot take maybe a few episodes back, where I said that the design system should conform to what the users need. I think we did this well, and I kind of dove directly into like the toughest problems we saw in a mature design system. We did this well. However, we could have been better in the sense we should have had teams actively try to work together and saying these solve multiple teams' needs, and building out that repository of like these are patterns, and allowing the teams who are building these things to contribute those patterns to a repository. Because from there, we actually could curate and find solutions that teams were solving together, and that would foster more community. Like teams would be responsible for contributing back, while the more atomic or layout related elements were owned by the design system. But we should probably also just note, so to give a more of a broad history, our design system, I mentioned this a little bit. The design system we worked on, it started very fixated on data and the code were combined. So it was very rigid. Everything was like you pass an object into the component and it can only do so many things. I think buttons, you couldn't add icons at first. You might have been able to through children, but there might not have been support. So it was really about a design system. Usually when you start is about getting consistency, cohesive branding, applications that feel and look like one another, and getting people used to these APIs that will allow teams to not worry about the UI as much and reduce UI overhead. But as they become more complex, some of these use cases prop up where things are more flexible. Components, they're multiple layers, they're more components, they're broken out into more abstractions, and essentially teams start to unpack some more difficult problems to solve, and essentially look for ways to make things a little more unique for their portion of the site.
Maybe to like sort of tangent off into a slightly separate topic on design systems. I think, Scott, earlier on you were talking about like organization size and whether or not it makes sense to invest in design systems, or more so like what does your investment in a design system look like depending on the size of your organization. I think that's an interesting thread to pull on. At Wayfair, we maybe benefited from having a pretty large organization, which also sort of in turn meant a fairly large investment in generally platform tooling, and that's kind of like where our design system lived as well. So it's like we had a decent amount of support, up until before maybe we left. But we, through that investment, like it allowed us to spend a lot of time in building not only the tokens, the tooling, tokens, the components, the the Figma components and things like that, or originally it was in Sketch. Um, but also all the like meta stuff that comes with building a design system. So for us, that was like documentation site, like documentation features. That Scott, you had talked about like our sandbox that we had built for that. It's like all the like investing in lint rules and like tooling that helps other teams adopt the design system. I think that's like a really, I think most companies that maybe are smaller don't have the opportunity to spend that investment. So I think just like sort of organization size kind of impacts what your design system looks like. Maybe we can kind of dig into specifics there.
Yeah, I have a thought, Matt. I want to say that like I think we got a little bit lucky in terms of like being at a time and a place in a company where it's like it's growing and it's allowing the engineering team to invest in this sort of area and go off on their own in a sense and like improve the internal tooling. Because I don't know if you guys remember, but one of the biggest challenges we had while being on the design system team was like quantifying and selling the value of what we were doing. And I think that's a lot harder at a smaller company, but if you're at a larger company where there's like a lot of money to throw around, I guess is lack of a better word, where you can just invest in the internal tooling. It just makes it a lot easier to be creative and improve these things. Where at my current company, I found that like we just don't have those resources, so it's really hard to find the time to invest. And it's not like design systems are not something you can just spend half of your time on. You need dedicated people that are thinking about this every day and thinking of ways to set it up for your company in the best way possible, and also documenting and educating the teams on how to use things properly. There's a ton that goes into it. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's very hard to account for every component use case while you're building those systems. So that's why it takes those dedicated folks. But also, we were very lucky to have some really good people to create buy-in. We had strong leaders who really pushed for this, and we even created some tools that showed adoption. And I think those tools that showed adoption really pushed our leadership to understand that, oh wow, this can happen pretty quickly. It's hard to quantify time saved by building something like this, but we tried to use the tools that showed adoption to help ease that trouble. And these are tools that our leadership could view and use, and it helped sell the design system a little bit more. Something else I wanted to bring up is that I kind of maybe surface level touched this, but component libraries versus design systems. I don't know which I fully prefer these days. I think maybe design system, if it's a corporation, makes more sense. But essentially, I don't know if this is more of just kind of how Matt and I have talked about this, but a component library is more like your bootstrap. It's not really opinionated. It gives you some things out of the box. It's very much ShadCN, although even ShadCN is more opinionated than your traditional component library. But essentially, it gives you a great starting point that you can change. It doesn't have too many opinions on how you use the pieces, but it gets you further than what you get for free out of the native browser. Whereas a design system is very much strongly opinionated. It may include some things that you weren't looking to use, or it may be a little bit more rigid. While I believe design systems should have flexibility, and that is the right path, you will get more opinionated pieces using a design system. So it is worth noting that you should use one of the two. You should have some semblance or decision making on consistency. However, you needed to determine the right path for your organization size, which works best for us. Or do these things need to be in every single application your company owns? So I talked about how Wayfair, we were like, oh, the admin tools have a design system. But did they really need one? The problem we were trying to solve was more of, we just want consistency. But again, design systems are really opinionated. And if you're not looking at what are the types of components internal admin tools need to be used all the time, and you're not going to dedicate time to that, you're creating more friction for those folks, when in reality, they might have just needed some off-the-shelf component library or SHAD-CN to solve their problem. And in reality, we don't care how they use the pieces. We just want to make sure they have normalized pieces and they can make those decisions. But there's cohesion as to how it looks across applications.
All right, Scott, I'm gonna argue semantics here, and you can punch back if you want. I think component libraries are just like one of the puzzle pieces of a design system. Like, if you're just using a component library, you're just using like a small piece of what a design system can be, but there can be a lot more structure to it. Yeah, I'm just arguing semantics. It's like a design system is just like a structure that you can follow that can lead you to a consistent design for your company. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree. I think that a component library is just a little like I keep using unopinionated and opinionated. I think I stole this from Rogan, but it's a good descriptor. Essentially, a component library is a building block that is like a design system. It looks a certain way, it does a certain thing, but it has more flexibility. It is less rigid, and if you want to change it, it's easier. It's like a starting point, is how I see it, or it is a styled UI solution that should work across browser compatibility. It doesn't really care how you use it. And I say that in sense of like you could use a drawer to solve everything. You could use a button as a link. It doesn't really care. Whereas in a design system, there's probably a little bit more of a rigidity to that. Whereas like maybe all buttons look like buttons, and you can't do that. I would argue that's probably a bad example. However, you might see more APIs in a design system that you're locked into. There might be icons locked into places. Maybe you can change the icon, but you have to have an icon. There's just likely more rigidity to it.
Yeah, I think that, like kind of similarly, like I think the core maybe differences between a component library and design system is that the design system includes things that are usually like non-tangible, whereas a component library is like just like the code basics. At least that's how I view it. And I was kind of like to my earlier point of like a design system is like a contract. It's like sometimes it's more the like meta around using a component library. It's like the rules and guidelines, which sometimes code doesn't enforce, sometimes it can enforce, but sometimes it's more so just like here's a number of paragraphs about why you should use this variant of a button for this use case, when in reality like any feature team could probably end up pulling in a component and using a different component for that use case, and it's like might solve the customer's problem, but it probably doesn't necessarily meet the what the design system is intending to lead the feature or the product towards, I guess.
Right. That's a better example, Matt. Like the destructive state of a button. We might have red buttons that are very specifically for these states. Whereas when you get a component library, it's just like an out of the box, it works in all the browsers, and it gives you a consistent default, and it's malleable. You can change it to be whatever you want, and you have a little bit of autonomy to do that in the system. You may not build it that way. However, a component library would be meant to give you some more autonomy.
All right, I think we could probably talk a whole weekend about design systems as a topic. Unless you guys have any like either like further pressing thoughts here, I think we could probably look at transitioning into our segments for the rest of the episode. But yeah, any further thoughts there, Dillon or Scott?
I think all my further thoughts are spicy takes.
Perfect. Unfortunately, you have to save them for after Two Takes and a Fake, which is our next segment. Scott, do you want to listen to Two Takes and a Fake?
Here we are, Two Takes and a Fake, everyone's favorite segment. This is where I ask Matt and Dillon questions about tweets or skeets or zeets or skeets. Yeah. So I stay on X, not really, but I mostly am now looking at Blue Sky, where I look for some takes from people in the software community that are real, and then one that I just make up. So it's up to Dillon and Matt to guess which one is the fake. So here we go.
Before we dig in, Scott, do you remember our score? Like who is winning?
I think it's 1-1.
I thought Dylan had taken the lead, but I'm not sure.
Points are all made up and they don't matter. I don't know.
All right.
We're going to say it's 1-1 and I'll look into it because we didn't do this last week. So, all right. So the 3 topics this week we have in the next version of Bun, the Vercel changelog, and Next.js. And if any viewers want to leave some comments about anything they want us to do in 2 takes and a fake, we'd be happy to take those topics. Please influence our segments. All right. In the next version of Bun. Okay. In the next version of Bun, Bun gets 1 megabyte smaller on Linux and Mac OS. In the next version of Bun, Bun.serve gets built-in support for hot reloading front-end applications. In the next version of Bun, Bun automatically converts JavaScript code to Rust for optimal performance. Start with Matt. Matt, which one is the fake?
I think I'm gonna go with the third one, the converting JavaScript to Rust. Although it sounds like a really exciting, cool feature, but I know Bun is a Zig shop, so I don't think they would want to convert it to Rust.
All right. Matt's locked in. Dillon, which one is the fake?
I'm scared to go with the obvious choice, but I don't know, man. It has to be the third one. Like that has to be the fake.
All right, locked in. You're both correct. This week I wanted to start it off with a little bit of something you might be able to get. I think we've been a little difficult. So, all right, they don't get any easier from here. So we got a tie, 1-1. Vercel changelog. Okay, first one up. Vercel now maps dependencies in your log file to applications in your monorepo, reducing build queuing by deploying only the apps affected by dependency updates. Number 2, the Vercel firewall now supports using an OR operator for custom WAF rules, conditions, and groups. Number 3, Vercel Edge config now includes built-in AI-powered caching, automatically predicting and serving frequently accessed data for faster response times. Which one's the fake?
I'll start it off this time just to make it fair. I'm just gonna go with 3 again, but also say I don't know what's going on. I don't know what any of these features are in Vercel. I don't use Vercel.
Right. 3 is locked
I'm
in.
just gonna
Matt.
be anti-AI this time again.
Yeah, I think 3 is the fake one. It sounds like something they would 100% like. Hopefully, maybe a Vercel employee is listening and they're gonna be like, yeah, let's take this idea right up to Guillermo and say, let's build this. But I think 3 is the fake.
I'll tweet this at Guillermo that they need to build this. You're both right. 2 for 2. This is great. I'm loving it. All right. Our last topic, Next.js. Tired of debugging slow Next.js builds? Just migrate everything to plain HTML. Problem solved. Number 2, navigation feels slow in Next.js. Use loading.tsx instead of suspense when possible. Stop complaining about the performance of frameworks like Next.js. If your web application is slow, it's because you're a failed developer. It's actually because you're failed as a developer. Same difference, though.
Dylan, do you want to guess first?
Yeah, Dillon, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, I'll go with number 1. Tired of debugging. Migrate to plain HTML.
Yeah, I think number 1 is the fake also. Maybe because I for sure saw number 2 posted. So I'm also terminally online. So
Well, that's the whole point of this: are you terminally online? You're both right. This is unbelievable. You're both 3 for 3. The tie stands. We need some foghorn sounds. Good job, boys. All right. That's 2 takes and a fake.
Nice. Should we kick or go straight into spicy takes after this?
yeah, let's do it.
All right.
Dylan, do you want to introduce? Like what are spicy takes? What
All
is the
right,
scale
guys.
we use? Also,
We're gonna go straight into the spicy takes segment. That's the spicy takes with Curry. My last name is Curry. There's a joke there, probably.
We take the Taco Bell packets as our scale. It is mild, medium, hot, fire, Diablo. We're all shooting for the Diablo takes. All mine are typically mild. Who wants to start us off?
I can kick us off. All right. First spicy. I got 2 spicy takes, if that's okay.
It's usually
Whoa.
not because Matt says it's not, but I'm okay with it, Dylan. Give us 2
we'll let
spicy
it
takes.
fly.
It's your segment.
I miss using Storybook. I'm at a company where we don't have it, and it's a spicy take. I actually think I like it. Most people, yeah, most people seem to hate it, but I think I like it now.
Wait. So your take is I miss Storybook. I like Storybook.
Yeah.
Matt, can you please go first? I'm still digesting this take.
That is a Diablo take, in my opinion. Because you know what? Like I'm gonna jump the gun here. My hot take was that you don't need to use Storybook, which seems very mild now compared to what you were saying, Dylan. Storybook is the absolute worst. So the fact that you miss using it is that's Diablo, 100%.
That's awesome.
I have fallen out of my chair twice for the viewers, the listeners. That is absolutely a Diablo take. I'm with Matt. It took me I feel like Mr. Krabs in the SpongeBob meme. I don't know what's going on. We'll post that in the show notes. I don't know where we are. I just remember Storybook having so many dependency issues that I can't agree. I'd rather build my own Storybook. Wow. All right. Go ahead. Your second take, Dylan. Sorry.
My second take is that drawers and modals are just design anti-patterns. It's like the junk drawer, where you just take the things we don't know where to put them, and we just stick them in the modals in the drawers. Any spice on that, or is that just mild?
Can I add an amendum to that? Can I say that
Yeah, go for it.
toasts are too?
Yeah, I was gonna say full page modals, but that should never exist.
I agree with that.
As the original creator of the full page modal at Wayfair.
Dude, it's still haunting my dreams. Like I created it at Wayfair, and then it was just abused and used for
People
everything.
used it? I never really noticed the use case.
And now my new my current company, they're like resizing the modal to be full page in certain screens, and I'm just like, son of a.
Oh boy.
I like modals for alerts, but like the thing is, it's hard for me to rate this as like a Diablo take because I just agree so much. But like it is, I guess, still a hot take. Like it's still right in the middle of the scale. I use toasts, and I think modals are great for alerts. And I actually think one great use case Matt and I did at Fireworks was our friction modals. Basically, like, do you want to delete this thing? Are you sure you want to delete this thing with a input where you had to type in a key and confirm that you were going to delete? So delete confirmation modal, we called it. I think that like is a good use case for a modal, but we've seen so many abused use case. Well, they're not use cases, but abusive drawers and modals in our lifetimes that I think we're all just in shock. And I was absolutely abusing toasts at Tollbit, which that was just unfortunately this is like a SHA-CN pattern that is adopted. I don't always agree with it, but yeah, people love toasts these days. It's kind of just like I don't know what to do with it. I'm going to use a modal toast or drawer, and yeah, not great.
I still remember like our first version of a modal at Wayfair in the design system would go between a full page modal on mobile web, or like basically like a drawer, a full page drawer on mobile web, to a regular size modal on desktop. Like the same component would do those two different things, and it was like the worst thing to try to untangle that.
Yeah, I just think it's a crutch of like the page is built a certain way, and the designer or the team or the product manager is just like too lazy to adjust the page and how it looks, like what the UI is on the literal page. So they just like throw it in some other UI that pops up on the page.
It is absolutely a crutch. There have been some abhorrent use cases, but I do want to note there are some times when they make sense. But few and far between. I think it's harder for me to think of one offhand. but agreed. Like you should question if you need those things before you recommend them. Like I guess like filters could be a decent drawer use case. I don't know if I love that, but I've seen it done okay. I was just trying to give an example.
As always, Scott coming in with the it depends.
I don't want to say it depends. I guess it depends applies.
It
But
depends.
but more than anything, like I think you should ask yourself, do I really need a modal drawer or a toast before I do this? Like, how can I do? Yeah, like toasts, like, or I'm gonna rant about toast, but like they're just like, yeah, sure, they show up at the bottom of the page or maybe the top, wherever. But like, why not just put the error message right next to where the error occurred? Like that's usually what it's used for, right? Like, I mean, sometimes I think it makes sense. It's an easy pattern. It's something, sometimes developers take these patterns because it's just like it's there and I'm just gonna use it and move on. But if you have designers, they should really be thinking through flows. We've seen a lot of. I remember watching user flows. Sorry, I was gonna say this, but I remember watching user flows at W where the users would just get so confused because they'd have to go in and out of a drawer. And it's just like, why would you make them go back and forth at all? Unless they're filters. Again, the only use case that I think is maybe okay. I'm not advocating for it.
Is that your hot take, Scott?
Do I have a hot take?
Well, I was wondering if that's your hot take.
I mean, it might as well be. Can I have two then? I mean, I'm on a rant, dude. I am caffeinated beyond belief at this point.
I was about to say, like, we might want to rename or like maybe we need a new segment called like the Daily Rant or something because
Scott's
going on
caffeine corner.
yeah.
K's caffeine
What's grinding
corner.
your gears? Yeah. All right, Scott, what's your hot take for this week?
Yeah, let me find it. It's like so mild in comparison. All right. I said that I wanted to keep it on the topic of design systems. A very last minute rough take, but all design systems should allow class name overrides.
That's pretty I don't know, I feel like that's a pretty hot take.
You can roast me. You can say it's mild.
Well, it's like
It's controversy, right? It's controversial.
yeah. I think it works if the teams that are using the components have like experience and know what not to do.
So my point on that would be like to expand on this just a little. I would say they should have class name overrides, but teams need to be educated, right? Like my thought is, unless it's like a group of components that you need to change the layout, in reality, you should just be changing class names, stylistic changes. So separating layout and style concerns. But certain components, I don't know if you have components for like, grids and flex elements, but essentially it's really styles you want to change. And it may be some cases it's layout, depending on, again, if it's like a collection of components. So education.
I feel like I'm torn on my rating of this. I feel like as a design system engineer, like I feel like that take would be like a Diablo take, but as a product engineer, I feel like that's a mild take. Like I feel like
I agree.
product engineers, yeah, like they 100% agree. Design system engineers realize that doing that is going to make it basically impossible to roll out changes to components, which is something that we're seeing at HubSpot at the moment, actually, of like trying to burn down usage of style and class name on components because it makes it literally impossible for them to roll out new designs. So I guess I'll rate it fire from that perspective.
To go down this path a little bit more, you could just like look at every class name string and only accept certain ones, but I guess that would require to use something like Tailwind, right? And then you could curate it. So you do have some control over what people do when you do that.
Yeah, I don't know. It feels like a straight fire way to like get the bug reports to the system saying they passed in a class name, it's not being applied. Why is it not being applied?
You didn't read the fine print on the opinionated design system. No, just kidding.
I was going to give one quick thought. When we were at Wayfair, we didn't allow this, but eventually we did basically add like 100 props to every component. And maybe it didn't feel like we did, but we definitely did, which gave like a subset of classes that were allow it to be applied. Maybe you guys were touching on that. So it's like we kind of went the same route, but within like a range of control. Like you can do these things, but you can't go outside of these bounds.
I think that's the right balance to draw from, at least at a large system, large company, large system. Like the right balance is give a suite of props that allow customization within some boundaries.
It is good that I like that solution. I thought it was good, but like adding 100 props to a component has its ups and downs. Like I think what we did was really a great solve, but I might have tried the same thing using class name and just providing like all the options on for the user in one prop as opposed to having 100 props, because it's like, what do they call that? But basically it's like prop over saturation, I guess. There's so many props, it starts to become a little crazy. However, the way we did it was very smart. We separated those types of props into their own group and bucketed them to make it a little bit more clear that they were something different. So I do think the solution was great. But I guess that I'm like more pro class name now because of using Shadcn so much and Tailwind. And here it comes. I think Tailwind is phenomenal. I have a blog post about it. You should try it. And just because you can write really good CSS, oh my God, it's a new hot take. Just because you can write really good CSS, you should be able to write really great Tailwind, because Tailwind does all the hard parts of CSS for you. And when you have a really big application and you have styles that need to load in the header fast and whatnot, Tailwind does that for you. It does the hard parts for you. It is great to be great at CSS, but you should be able to do both. Tailwind is a great solution.
I don't know. Is that mild for most people? I feel like most people love Tailwind, but at the same, I've been using it lately, and maybe I'm just like going against the grain of it because my hot take is that I kind of hate it. It could be that the way that people are using it is just really, really bad. Like I'm seeing where like one div has 48 classes on it, and it just feels impossible for me to like read the code and understand what's happening. And it just gets like put on one line, and I just don't know what I'm looking at. And I just like miss the days of like, oh, there's one class, it has 5 properties, I know exactly what it's doing, and it's being applied to this element.
I think to your point, Dillon, that I think there's like this old guard of like, web developers that like maybe hate it because of that lens, right? Like because they were so used to just like plain old CSS.
Yeah, you just can't teach an old dog new tricks, I guess.
Exactly. Unless you're Scott.
That's exactly it. My take is like, if you don't like Tailwind, you just haven't used it long enough to experience the benefits. You haven't tried it enough. That's my honest take, because that is the one problem and everyone complains about it. But guess what? There are all these like class names, or Shadcn has like its CN function. Essentially, you can provide different strings. You can organize the class names into multiple subsets of strings. You can put layout related stuff together. You can put responsive stuff together. You organize it the way you want. So it might have tons of class names on it, but guess what? You could also set that to a constant or a variable so it looks the way you like, Dillon. Like there are ways around this. So to me, like when engineers just complain like, oh, I don't like it's a long string. I was like, yeah, but with every new solution comes a new series of problems. But there are ways around it looking that way. So to me, it's just this outsider's view that I don't like the way it works. It's different than what I'm used to. You haven't tried it long enough to experience the benefits.
I think we should do a whole episode on Tailwind. I feel like it could be a really interesting discussion.
We have it and we have to.
All right. I think that about wraps it up for this week's episode. I just want to like sort of end on a quick outro. Please like and subscribe and share this podcast with your friends and family. We don't do any paid promotion. Like we don't go out there and tell people to promote the podcast yet. Maybe we start dropping in on other friends' podcasts and sharing it around. But yeah, we don't do any paid promotion currently, so we entirely rely on word of mouth. I think that's how we got to like the top 170 in Romania. Must be word of mouth there. So hopefully we can hit the top 170 of the US or other countries around the world. As always, thanks for listening. Peace out. Catch us next week.
Later.
Peace.